Please listen carefully.
Yes. Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for having me. I am really excited to be here. I have been following Expo for the last couple years, and I am really excited to get to share this stage and this room with so many creative people and world changers. And I am also happy to get to contribute to the larger conversation that we are going to be having in the next days. So I am here to break paradigms about the informal sector. And since time is very limited, I'm just going to jump in. And I want to start with some images of the cities where we live in. So this is the city of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, and that is Ipanema neighborhood, one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in the world. This is the world-famous Inner Harbor in Baltimore, here in the US. This is the central business district in the city of Melbourne in Australia. And this is one of the central business districts in the city of Quito in Ecuador. So some of these images might be familiar to a lot of you. However, these photos show only one part of the story. The other part of the story is the part that we usually don't like to show. And that includes the favelas in Rio de Janeiro, which are informal settlements, and this is favela Roxinha. This is one of the 1,000 favelas in this city. It also includes homeless people along Route 40 in the city of Baltimore. It includes some of the spontaneous singers and artists that very often are informal in Swanston Street in the city of Melbourne. And it also includes informal transport systems in the city of Quito, in the periphery of this city. So this is the part of the story that we usually don't like to talk about. And this is what I call the informal city. And I am here today to share the reasons why I think that the part of the story that we usually ignore is the part of the story that we should be focusing on. So the informal city is the city where we live. It is all around us, and it has different manifestations. It can manifest with informal settlements, such as the case of Bangkok in Thailand. So these are shelters that sometimes can become even neighborhoods, which are there because of the lack of provision of affordable housing. It can also manifest with informal commerce, such as the case of Mexico City and Jaipur in India. And these are small informal business that can grow and can become significant commerce nodes in several cities. It can also manifest with spontaneous consolidations of public space. These photos were taken in Varanasi in India, and these images show people's willingness to create a sense of belonging in the places where they live. And it can also manifest with informal transport systems. This photo was taken in Jaipur as well, and these are 3-wheels bicycles that transport people from one place to another. So all these manifestations that we see here, all that is what we usually call the informal economy. And the official definition of informal economy, which is also known as gray economy or black market, is hidden activities that are neither taxed nor monitored by any type of government. And all these manifestations that we have here are also most of the time associated with developing countries, with emerging economies, and with poverty. However, informality is not exclusive to poverty, because in the context where we live in, very often the formal sector adopts practices of the informal sector, such as the case of any formal company that does not declare all its transactions, or the latest example when Google, Amazon, and Starbucks were accused for tax avoidance. So this shows that informality is all around us, that different parts of society are involved in this movement, and that probably we are more related to it than what we think we are. And it is very important to recognize that the informal sector plays a significant role at the moment of creating jobs, opportunities, and production itself. As Robert Negurit says, 2/3 of the workers in the world belong to the informal sector. And they contribute with about $10 trillion per year to the global economy, which positions the informal sector as the second strongest economy in the world, following the US economy. And if trends keep as they are, it is very likely that in the next 50 years, the informal sector will be the largest and strongest economy in the world. So this evidence tells us that the informal sector is not something that we should hide, and it is not something that we should ignore, and it is not a mistake. Informality is a reality, and it is a very powerful system at the moment of determining what are the forces that are shaping the development of our cities and our nations. And it is a system that should be looked like that. So with the aim of understanding a little bit more of these systems, a research project with the University of Melbourne in Australia, and later on with Virginia Tech, arose. And we took as an example the city of Quito, and we focused on informal transport systems in the periphery of the city. So Quito is a South American city, in which most of its population move from one place to another with either private transportation or with formal transport systems, as the picture that we have in the right. However, due to the lack of provision of infrastructure to the periphery, there are some communities that are completely isolated from all the services that the city offers. And that is when these informal connectivity systems, which are the ones in the picture of the left, arose to the city. And so in order to break the existing dichotomy between formal and informal, we wanted to look at informal car share system in Quito with a new perspective. So the first step was creating a theoretical framework to guide this project. And this included 3 main areas. The first one was all the existing literature about formality and informality. And we found here that the informal sector is usually a way to fill the gaps that the formal sector cannot fill, and that it is a space for the most vulnerable and for the segregated. Most specifically, when we looked into informal transport literature, we found that although informal transport systems fill the gaps that the formal transport cannot fill, we found that there are a lot of negative implications associated with informal transport. And those include the contribution to pollution, to congestion, unsafe practices, among others. However, we realized that a lot of these negative implications, which the informal sector is blamed for, are shared by the formal sector as well, such as is the case in South American cities, where you can see that the formal sector contributes as well to a lot of those negative implications that we blame the informal sector for. And since existing literature defines the informal sector by comparing it with the formal sector, and since we know that the formal sector doesn't work 100% perfect either, we didn't want to limit our study to a comparison. So we decided to look at the informal sector in an independent way with a completely new perspective. We didn't want to compare this system with anything else, we just wanted to evaluate this system as it is. So, and then is when the literature about theory came to the picture. So we found that in order to evaluate a system, you need to look not only at system effectiveness and the ways how the system perform, but also at the social, economic, and environmental impact, and at the ways how the system adapts when it faces shocks. And we also found that the lack of transportation is directly correlated with poverty, and that is where the last piece came into the study, which is the part of economic welfare and justice. So we also wanted to know how is this system contributing to people's economic welfare and to justice in general. So with this base, the first step was 2012, we started a project with the University of Melbourne, and we wanted to measure what is the impact and significance of informal car share in Quito's peripheral dwellers. And we focus in one community that is in the periphery of Quito, and this community is called Mirador. And after 2 years of studying this project, we found that since informal car share became available in this community, people's ability to access jobs increased dramatically, people's ability to access education and training programs increased in a significant way as well, and that people increase also their perception of safety and a lot of other additional capabilities, such as having more time to spend in their communities or being able to bring more food to their house. So this showed that this informal car share system is improving people's quality of life dramatically, which is something that even the local and national efforts haven't been able to do. Later on, with Virginia Tech, we wanted to know what are the features of this system that are making this system work. And this is a project that is still going on, but so far we know that an informal transport system in the city of Quito is currently connecting the periphery with the inner city, and that if it weren't because of this system, a lot of peripheral communities would be completely isolated from the systems that the city has to offer. And now we are looking at the resilience features of this system. Quito is a city that once in a while has to deal with floods, and when this happens, all the city get paralyzed, and that includes the formal transport. However, we found that the informal transport have developed a communication system that is so resilient that when routes get blocked because of floods, they talk to people and they take alternative routes and they reach their final destination with almost no delays. So this evidence shows us that we have a lot to learn from the informal sector. And it is important to understand that this is only one example of one system in one community in one Latin American city. But we have examples about the informal sector all around us. And it is very important to recognize that currently we live in cities and towns that have physical manifestations of urban segregation, and that all efforts to promote inclusive cities are valid. And that includes the efforts that come from local and national governments, the efforts that come from academia, from professional groups, but it should also include the efforts that come from people, from communities, from users. And these efforts that come from people should not only be recognized, but they should also be studied and taken into account at the moment of deciding what is the future that we want. Because it is this understanding what will help us build a real scenario of the society where we live in. And as Fraser says, this will help us understand what are the lines of development that are happening despite of our intention. And that will help us see in a clear way what are the options that we have. I just want to close with a final message that for me it summarizes the current debate about the informal sector, and is that unless we work with all the pieces, we will never be able to solve this puzzle. Thank you very much. My name is Vanessa Guerra. Please stay in touch and let's keep the conversation going.